And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta, you pint-sized protester. It is Friday, and this is our own personal Friday protest, the Climate Realism Show, episode number 114. Heatwave alarm season is here with the same old claims, but a different year. I'm your host, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow for Environment and Climate with the Heartland Institute. Joining me today, Dr. H. Sterling Burnett, Director of the Robinson Center for Climate, and Heartland Institute Research Fellow, Linnea Lueken. Welcome, guys. Hope you've had a good week.
Howdy, howdy.
So far, so good.
All right. Well, at least climate change has not reached out and bitten either of you, and I'm glad to have you here. So anyway, it's that time again, kids. Time to panic the American people over heat waves by blaming them on climate change. The media is doing that this week. Past week, several news outlets talked about the Western heat wave and tried to link it to climate change. The source of this was an outfit called Climate Central. They were the source of most of these, with a press release that said between June 5th and 7th, much of the western United States, Mexico, and eastern Canada are poised to experience a period of unusually hot conditions, made much more likely because of human-caused climate change. During this period, over 229 million people across North America will experience extreme heat, made at least 3 times more likely because of human-caused climate change. We see this every year, and we'll see it again this year, later in the, like in August or whatever, when we have another heat wave. And the feckless media just regurgitates this heat wave hype. And we'll get to that in a moment. But first, our regular feature, the crazy climate news of the week. First one is a hat tip to our regular viewer, Bob J., known as the Engineering Guy SC on Twitter. And this one I dubbed Climate Change Idiot of the Month. This is Representative Brad Schneider, Democrat from Illinois. And he put out this questionnaire to his constituents. And it was about cicadas. Okay, because, cicadas are roaming throughout Illinois and causing all kinds of disruption, right? So what does he do? With the emergence of this year's broods, as well as the recent storms and extreme tornado events, are you worried about the impacts of climate change? Because somehow tornadoes and cicadas and climate change are all linked together, right? Oh, my goodness. So I want to point out to Representative Schneider that cicadas come in 13 and 17-year cycles. I know this. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up as a kid dealing with these things. These 2 cycles just happen to coincide this year. And the bugs,
Which, by the way,
huh?
Just to mention, Anthony, which, by the way, they have done in the past on multiple occasions.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing new here, right? But, they're claiming the early emergence of the cicadas is due to climate change. Well, it's a little warmer than usual this particular spring. That is not climate change. That's weather. What if, the year was different? What if we had a very cold spring and the cicadas weren't coming out until later? Would that be climate change too? I don't know. The whole thing is just bizarre. It's just bizarre.
The cicada thing is bizarre up in Illinois right now. People are really hyped about the cicadas, or really terrified about the cicadas, and it's kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
Cicadas themselves are sort of bizarre but cool.
This is from Al Gore's website. He jumped on it too.
As a person who used to catch them.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Here's the data. on Twitter, a guy by the name of The Monster said, with 12 to 17-year broods and three 17-year broods and three 13-year broods, there's a coincident emergence of two broods roughly every 6 to 7 years, or 36 out of 221 years in the cycle. That's not climate change. That's just math. Anyway.
Nature.
So that's why Representative Snyder gets the Climate Change Idiot of the Month award.
He shares it with Al Gore, though, as you mentioned, to be fair.
Right. Okay, so let's go on to our next one. Florida rain and flooding, brought to you by climate change. Yes, $1 billion thunderstorms. Now, remind me again, Sterling, are thunderstorms weather or climate?
Well, here in Texas, they're recurrent weather. I can't speak for the rest of the nation as a whole.
Didn't you have some $1 billion thunderstorms down there in Texas a little while ago?
Well, I don't know if they turn out to be $1 billion, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I mean, like I said, every year we have something called spring here in Texas. And when spring comes, it rains a lot and we get a lot of thunder and lightning with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have flood, except in drought years, and we do have drought years, but except in the rare drought year, we have flooding. We have flooding near my house. And you know where they really, really have flooding? There's this little town on the coast of Texas called Houston. And they built it on a swamp, on wetlands, and it's sinking. And so when it rains, they flood. But you wouldn't know that from reading the headlines. You wouldn't know that from reading the headlines.
Right. Linnea, do you have to deal with thunderstorms out there on the East Coast?
Oh yeah, pretty much everywhere. The worst thunderstorms I ever got were when I lived in Illinois, though. That was this time of year, just rocking and rolling. It was a lot of fun, actually. Nice, because for most of the time that I lived there, I lived in a big brick house, so you felt pretty well secure from it.
Well, that's good. You don't have to worry about the big bad wolf either.
Yeah.
Climate change is the big bad wolf, right?
Right.
So anyway, so the media is out there touting this flooding going on in Florida, as being indicative of climate change. But, we always go straight to the science here. And of course, the IPCC says, Now, this is the table from Chapter 12 of the UN IPCC Sixth Assessment Report. And if you look at the section on wet and dry, mean precipitation has not emerged in the current period as being driven by climate change. Heavy precipitation and pluvial flood also has not emerged as a signature of climate change. So, I'm sorry, Bloomberg, you're just wrong. Right?
Yep. Sorry, I had Sterling muted.
That's okay. I don't know if we should follow the science, but we should definitely believe the science when it's clear like this.
Yeah. Speaking of believing or not believing science, we have our Mr. Sciencey, Michael Mann. He posted something this week that was just, oh my goodness, over the top. So here he is. He's responding to Sabine Hassenfelder. Now, Sabine is a well-known lukewarmer. She thinks, climate change is happening. Maybe it's not a biggest problem. And so she writes, climate change is bad. We hear this a lot, but this isn't the full story. Climate change also has benefits, something we talk about at the Heartland Institute a lot. And I think we need to talk about those too. Some regions of this planet will see milder climate and better conditions from agriculture. We'll see fewer people freeze to death. And yes, some plants actually benefit from carbon dioxide. We should hire that girl. She writes much like what we write on Climate Realism every day. But here's the thing. Mann says, well, I'm sure you're right, but this is a talking point that comes straight out of the Heartland Institute. So in essence, Mann is saying, with, talking point of the Heartland Institute, and I'm sure you're right, Mann finally admits the Heartland Institute is right. Hoorah, hoorah.
Well, if that's not crazy, I don't know what is. Mann agreeing with us, that I am looking to the skies to see if they open and 4 horsemen come out.
The fact that he would say this is funny, since it kind of comes off as Mann admitting that he's one of those people who, if the Heartland Institute said that the sky is blue, he would be like, well, we can debate some of this, and he'd outright disagree and try to say that the sky is actually green. He's he's a character, that's for sure.
Well, he'd say, well, yeah, it is blue, but that's not the important point.
Yeah.
The important point is the blueness is getting less blue, and that's harming our visual acuity.
Yeah. Well, the final word on blueness, the atmosphere, the sky, is Rayleigh scattering. So I'll leave it at that. Anyway, but here's the kicker. Man is the most intolerant scientist on the face of the planet, at least as of we know. And, he just can't tolerate any kind of, anything that's against him. So what does he do? Check this out. He blocks her for suggesting that climate change might have some benefits. And, and he said, well, you might be right. And you know what he blocked me for, she says? For pointing out that his attempt at dictating others what they're allowed to say is fueling the fires of climate change deniers. Wow. What a piece of work.
But he's a defender of democracy, I'm sure.
As long as the democracy agrees with him.
Yeah, authoritarian democracy. That's what he's all about.
Right. Okay, on to the cartoons this week.
Wait, please.
Oh, hold on. Okay.
One more crazy climate news of the week I want to inject. The crazy climate news. As our audience knows, last week they couldn't monetize us. They couldn't give financial donations to our broadcast, right?
Right.
And it turns out it's not just this broadcast. It's across a lot of Heartland's platform. We've been demonetized because of evil Linnea. She has done this series of videos, which are engaging and highly popular, but YouTube determined that they are controversial and harmful to people. She's video drone like reaching out of the screen and actually harming people. And so they've demonetized us. I think we have a graphic of what YouTube said.
Linnea, you should stop being so cheerful and educational. You're hurting people.
I know. It's terrible.
Yeah. So if you wondered what happened, it wasn't a glitch on our part. It was YouTube actually taking action to say, oh, no, we can't allow people to finance this.
Yeah. So much tolerance. Okay, so speaking of disinformation, here's our first cartoon of the week from Henry Payne. And it's about the lie top, which is kind of a euphemism for everything that's going on in the media these days. That we were told that Hunter's laptop didn't exist. It's Russian disinformation. And then it was put into the trial this past week, admitted as evidence. Oops. But, at the same time, we have the same kind of crazy headlines coming from the media. Mask up, stop COVID, Fred. Gasoline cars cause bad weather. Ugh. Yeah, it's just the way of the world with the media these days. This one's kind of funny. Solar-powered chainsaw makes me feel less guilty about clearing trees to make way for a wind farm. Kind of like those people that are down there in the Joshua Tree in the National Wilderness, cutting down all those Joshua trees to make way for solar system, right?
Protected, by the way, protected Joshua trees, or the area of Scotland that's been denuded for wind farms. They cut down the trees, thousands and thousands of trees, which remove carbon from the atmosphere. If you're concerned about that type of thing, or if you just like wild habitat, they're cutting down all the trees to build wind farms. It's a great win for environmentalism.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's the left will make exceptions for anything they deem appropriate, but they won't make exceptions for any common sense stuff or anything that is proactive in terms of, helping people. It's all about, for them, they seem to be object oriented. They seem to be more about, getting solar panels and wind turbines and so forth. But when it comes to actually helping people, representing their constituents, that sort of thing, that's just, we need more climate change results, that kind of stuff. That's what we need. That's the ticket. Yeah. All right. Our final title, our final cartoon today.
Oh, there you go.
Pretty much sums this up. They're out there saying what a terrible environment we live in. And then, they pave it with solar panels and put up wind farms, and boom, everything's better. It's like unicorn world.
Well, you don't have the belching, farting cows and sheep and the birds that emit, methane. They're all wiped out. Plus you've got all that clean energy. So it is a green utopia there.
Yep. So that's pretty much the left this week. They're just out of control as usual. All right, let's get on to our main topic. Our main topic is Climate Central released some propaganda this week. Climate Central is run by former Weather Channel meteorologist Heidi Cullen, and it's all grant funded, of course. And so they released this signature of climate change, the fingerprint on heat from climate change. Now, notice it only shows the Western United States here for this. But see, here's the interesting thing. When you actually go and look at data, not manipulated data, things are different. Now, what is this particular thing representing? Is this data? I mean, does this look like data to you? Well, on the face of it, it sure does. Temperature departure, climate shift index, that looks like real data. But when you actually look at their website and read what they say about it, they say, how do we know climate change is influencing this heat? Well, they say the climate shift index uses peer-reviewed methodology to estimate how climate change has increased. Now, note the key word there, estimate how climate change has increased the likelihood of a particular daily temperature. It can be run using historical or forecast temperatures. Using computer models, we compared the likelihood that these temperatures would occur in a world without carbon emissions released by humans versus today's world with decades of carbon emissions building up in the atmosphere. This is an established scientific method to determine how much climate change has or has not affected individual extreme weather events. Right, computer models, that's the ticket.
Control for everything but carbon, and carbon must be the cause.
Yeah.
Ignore every other factor. But what's unusual, or what's not unusual, because it's common in climate science, I like the second bullet point. Phoenix, Tucson, Las Cruces, Las Vegas. What are some of the fastest growing cities in the United States today? Phoenix, Las Vegas. Huge population growth, huge development growth, right? The populations don't go and live in the desert. They actually pave it over and build houses and withdraw water, a lot of concrete. And we all know what that brings with it. Right. Anthony?
I guess you could say that Phoenix is full of climate refugees, except they're migrating toward the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Vegas too, right?
Uh-huh.
At one time, it was for gamblers who never left the casino, so it was air conditioned, so they didn't care. But now I'm told that Vegas is family friendly. We want families to move here, kids walking down the strip. So evidently, they're not that concerned about the heat.
Apparently not. And get this. Now look at bullet points 3 and 4 there. They're talking about how unusual is this heat event? Well, there'll be high temperatures of 105 to 112. Gosh, in the desert. Oh, no. That's never happened.
That's never happened. Yeah.
Right. Oh, and there's elevated nighttime temperatures in the 73 to 83 degree range expected across much of this region. Gosh, that's never happened before. It must be climate change.
I think that part of it is telling, right? I mean, that's what all of your work, a lot of your work is about, Anthony. That's what a lot of John Christie's and Roy Spencer's work is about. Elevated nighttime temperatures indicate what? Not global warming, but the urban heat island effect, as the heat stored in the concrete and the bricks and everything is slowly released at night, raising the nighttime temperatures.
Right.
Get it? They need to get a clue. I also want to point out, at the very first, you said, "Oh, look where they're not showing." I live in Texas. I have a pool. I'm not in my pool yet. There's a reason. At night, the temperatures are getting down too low still, and we're getting a lot of rain. We are not above average. We're below average for this time of year. And a lot of the United States, the parts of it they didn't show on their little map are not in excessive heat.
Yeah. I should point out that where I live, I don't have a pool because I didn't get my yearly check from Big Oil. Gosh. Anyway, so how unusual is this heat event? Well, it's not unusual at all. Let's look at this graph from the EPA showing heat wave index. Now, we've used this before, and this is from the EPA, right? This is real data. This is not climate model. And it showed in the United States in the 1930s, that's when the biggest heat waves happened. Well before carbon dioxide was ever an issue, well before it built up in the atmosphere. So what caused that, huh? Hey, all you scientists up there at Climate Realism, I mean at Climate Central, what's the deal? How did that happen?
Oh, have you heard what they're trying to say now, Anthony?
No, what?
They're trying to say that the Dust Bowl and the temperatures and stuff of the Dust Bowl were exclusively or primarily caused by poor farming practices.
Ugh.
And that some dude plowing up his field is the reason why these graphs look like this.
Right.
Well, humans cause global warming. Farmers cause global warming in the 30s, I guess. It's still humans. It's still humans.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, so let's just say the Dust Bowl doesn't really have anything to do with it. Let's just go to our next graphic here on the observed number of hot days. This is from NOAA, and it's showing, and this is for the whole nation. This isn't just for the Dust Bowl area. This is for everywhere. And look at that, same kind of pattern. And the current period, not so much. Bottom line here is that weather was much worse in the past. Temperatures in the summer were much worse in the past. And yet somehow it's really worse today if you believe the computer models, right? And never mind that data. That data is that's old stuff. Computer model data, that's the new thing.
The people at NOAA are like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz when Toto pulls back the curtain. And NOAA's concerning data is saying, ignore the man behind the curtain, ignore the data, see the big thing I'm flashing on the screen. That's what's important.
It is telling when you read these reports and you look at the data as they present it, and then you look at their commentary about it. There's often quite a bit of a disconnect. They'll hype up a trend that is, I guess, it's kind of, they I think rely on those 5-year average bars to kind of goose the appearance of trends where there aren't in some cases. I've noticed that a lot. They'll ignore the on these charts, I'll explain it because I don't think we have that part of the caption in the image here for the audience. But those yellow bars on this graph are 5-year averages of temperatures or the number of hot days, and then the black dots are actually the actual data points. So if you took away the yellow bars, especially on many of these charts, the trend kind of goes away. It's their average trends that are the averaging of 5-year clumps or 6-year clumps if the data doesn't line up properly. That kind of gives the impression. But when you look at the data by itself, it's pretty questionable whether or not there even is any kind of significant trend on a lot of this data.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at it in sort of a blown up fashion and looking at the peak points.
Yep.
And the ones just below the peak. It looks to me, I haven't drawn a line. I don't have the data numbers, but it looks to me, if anything, there's a decline since the 20s. 20s were as hot or hotter than today. almost consistently. The 1910s, look at that. They're all hotter than today. The trend line, if anything, is down. The 50s were hotter, but both 5-year averages and the three or four peak points. Like I said, it's not clear to me. You said it's not clear if there's a trend. I'd be interested in plotting it and seeing if it hasn't declined since the early part of the century.
Yeah. So here's the data analysis that I have on it. The average number of days greater than 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees centigrade declined by 18% during the 60-year period between 1961 and 2020, the right side of the graph. That was much more than the 60-year period between 1901 and 1960. So this thing's a good metric for determining how summer is in terms of heat wave intensity and frequency.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I'm suffering a little bit from allergies here, so I'm coughing quite a
That's
bit.
all right.
Yeah, that's probably climate change too. Anyway,
Probably.
Right. What happened to Sterling? He disappeared. Oh, wait, he's on the other side of the screen. I
don't think
covered him up with one of my windows. All right, so let's go on to this next graphic. Now, they're talking about Las Vegas, being hit by these temperatures. And Las Vegas is a really interesting place because you can track the growth, the economic growth of Las Vegas and the infrastructure along with temperature really well. So they're saying, with the high temperature on June 6th of 103.9, Las Vegas is 14 degrees above the supposed normal. All right. Well, that's all well and good, but why is it above normal? So let's go look at this first graph. And I want to say this is prepared by the National Weather Service in Las Vegas. Now, I got this several years ago, around 2014, almost 10 years old. And it's since disappeared from the National Weather Service website in Las Vegas, probably because someone told them to. So this is the average annual temperature from Las Vegas from 1937 up to around 2014. And you can see, it's gradually increasing just a little bit. And then around 1979, 1980, it starts going upward significantly. Okay, but in the next graph, which is overnight temperatures, the minimum temperatures, look at that. It's been steadily increasing, much more so. But, they're claiming Las Vegas is getting hotter, right? Well, let's look at the maximum temperatures in Las Vegas. The maximum temperatures for Las Vegas aren't getting hotter at all during that period. In fact, they're going down. So what is this? It seems to be the signature of UHI. It's pushing the average temperature up because the infrastructure is absorbing all of this, solar energy during the day and releasing it at night and causing the nighttime minimum temperature to increase. And here's the other thing. There seems to be no increase in high temperatures beyond the level first noted when record keeping began in 1937. No new maximum temperatures have exceeded the 117-degree record set on July 24th, 1942, but they were tied back in 2021 and at 117 degrees in 2021. So why did it take so long for the high temperature to be tied if climate change is making it hotter in Las Vegas?
80 years of warming ago was when the record was set initially. I would wager, Anthony, that if you had plotted the population growth in Las Vegas along the same axis, you'd find a pretty good correspondence between the spike in temperatures, the nighttime temperatures, and the overall temperature trend. I would wager it would go up like that.
Yeah. Now we have another graph that says the highest maximum temperature by year at Las Vegas. Next one, please. The highest maximum temperature by year at Las Vegas. So look at that. We had temperatures up to 117 degrees in 1942, and then none since then. What's up with that? What happened? Did climate change cause lower high temperatures, or is climate change not involved at all? Well, how I view it, climate change really is not affecting temperatures in Vegas. It's the infrastructure more than anything.
What's up with that would make a good name for a website, Anthony. You ought to check into that.
I checked it, taken. So, one of the most interesting studies of the past couple of years has been done by Dr. Roy Spencer, and he plotted UHI data, something nobody else has done. You know, NOAA didn't do it. You know, Climate Central didn't do it. He made this map, and this is huge. This is June 1850 is at the top, and June 2023 is at the bottom. If we can zoom in on that a little bit and look at the top graph, you can see that much of the western United States is completely devoid of urban heat island effects. And there were moderate to mild urban heat island effects throughout the highly populated East Coast and Eastern Midwest, Indiana, Ohio, and so forth. You know, this is when the population started moving west, right? So go to June 2023 and boom, look at all of these red dots. What are those red dots? Those are cities. And if you look carefully, you can see a big red dot for Los Angeles and San Diego in the southwest, but just up to the northeast of it, there's a dot. And guess what? That's Las Vegas. And up to the north of that, it's Salt Lake City. So with these kinds of values of data out there, you can see clearly that UHI is a huge effect on these cities. But yet somehow, you know, people like Climate Central, they refuse to acknowledge this. They insist that climate change is the issue, and UHI has nothing to do with it. And we got that handled, or we adjusted that out, or you know, it doesn't correspond with the climate model, or whatever their excuse is. They just continually ignore it.
I mean, look at those red dots. Put the graph back up, please. Look at those red dots all along the West Coast. So if you look north of California, well, there's Portland. I can see it. There's Seattle. If you look to the center part of the country, oh, wow, there's 3 or 4 red dots clumped right there in a place called Colorado that was barely populated in the early part of the century in 1850. I look at Texas. I know a little bit about it. Boy, that's a big clump right there where Dallas and Fort Worth is. Another big clump where Houston is, and in the Galveston area. There's Austin. I can see it. San Antonio. Chicago, right there on the lakes. Green Bay. You know, the point is, every place you see those big red dots, all of Florida, God, the whole entire coast of Florida. That's not coincidence, folks.
No, it's not. And here's the point. Temperature is measured where people are, not where people aren't. All those gray areas there, that's where people aren't. And there's no temperature measurements there. So that's why we're getting this UHI affecting everything. That's why, you know, when I did my report 2 years ago and I found that 96% of the stations operated by NOAA in the United States are compromised. They're compromised because they're too close to heat sources. They're not paying attention to their own siting rules. And that's the big thing. It pushes the nighttime temperature up, pushing the nighttime temperature up, you know, because of that retained heat, that UHI pushes the average temperature up, and average is what they use to track climate change. And there you go. It's just that simple.
Anthony, have you looked into some of the objections that people like Gavin from NASA and them have raised to these arguments? And do you have like you know, specific counters to them?
Well, not really. They don't. They just seem to tend to want to ignore UHI altogether. They don't really want to argue it. I mean, this is why Dr. Spencer put this together, because no one else has. You would think that NOAA would put this together themselves. They have not.
When I see Gavin talk about it, it seems to me he says, yes, we know UHI exists, but we have adjusted for it. We've homogenized the data. We've taken the rural stations and we've blended them. Well, that's like taking dirty water and blending it with clean water and expecting to get clean water. No, it's dirtying up the clean data. And how do they adjust it? Well, they put it through a computer model that says what we think it should be based on no CO2.
Right. They just ignore this. They just simply pay no attention to the fact that, the data is dirty and their cleansing methods don't work. Because it's their preconceived notion that climate change is causing warmer temperatures, and therefore, here they are. We've got these warmer temperatures, and there it is. It's proving climate change. They don't look any deeper than that. They don't want to. It's confirmation bias.
Yeah, I was about to say it's a logical fallacy. It's because there's an effect. It's claiming that what the cause is based on the effect.
Right. And that's it right there. Ed Reed says, we've got models. We don't need no stinking data. We don't need no stinking badges.
Yeah.
So that's the sum total of, the problem that we're having here. And that's what people like Climate Central are ignoring. And then they're pushing that out to the media. And unfortunately, and this is an even bigger problem, as we learn on a daily basis here at the Heartland Institute, when we write articles, pushing back on the media, most of the media doesn't have a clue about science. I mean, they don't even bother to scratch the surface and dig a little bit to see if some claim made is true or not. And this is why they get caught with their pants down a lot. And this is why climaterealism.com exists. I mean, one of my favorite examples was last year on July 4th, when somebody got a hold of some data at the Climate Reanalyzer from the University of Maine.
Not data, model projections.
Yeah. And they went and said, July 4th is the hottest ever. It's the hottest ever. It's record. It's terrifying.
125,000 years. Yeah.
Right. Terrifying. And the Associated Press at least had a small caveat in there in their July 5th story. But by the time July 7th rolled around, the Associated Press had to put a retraction in because they discovered that the data from Climate Reanalyzer out of the University of Maine was not suitable for purpose because it was reanalyzed data. It was yet another model. They were taking this data, reconfiguring it, spitting it back out, and presenting it as data. It's not. It's an analysis. It's a
jiggery
bias.
pokery is what it is.
What's that?
It's jiggery pokery is what it is.
Yeah. And so
you fiddle with it enough, you'll get the result you want.
Yeah. The media couldn't even find this. They just simply completely missed it. And then when the retraction went out there from the Associated Press, that little note that they stuck on it, nobody bothered to put a full-scale retraction out there. Oh, you remember those hottest ever record temperatures that were terrifying 2 days ago? Never mind. No, they didn't do that.
Yeah. The AP was the Emily Latella of people on here may not remember Saturday Night Live's Emily Latella by Gilda Radner, but that's what her response was always, never mind.
Well, it doesn't matter, and they know it. The journalists know it, that if they put out a false report about climate change or something or about the weather or whatever, or even something that's like only a little bit true, they know that the next day they can put a retraction or a little edit on their article, and everyone, or the vast majority of people who are going to read the article already read it and are not going to see the retraction. They're fully aware of that. It's not an accident.
I think Anthony is, as usual, far kinder than me. He believes that it's ignorance that they could correct. I believe it's intentional, not ignorance. They know that data exists. They can check data. They have entire staffs that are supposed to fact check articles that they don't do before they go out. So my belief is they're more especially the science and environmental journalists. They're more about pushing the narrative that they believe because they want control. They think there are certain controls and lifestyles that people they should control people's lives because they know best. And so it's not that they it's intentionally ignoring countervailing data. It's not an accident. It's not even laziness on their part. It's we don't want to know. It's intentional ignorance. We don't want to know that we're wrong, because what's important is the end, which is pushing climate alarm and climate policies.
Right. I guess being a journalist today means never having to say you're sorry. Where have we heard that?
Sad.
Okay, so you guys have seen these stories out there. What are some of your favorite examples of where the media just goes off the rails with high temperatures? Any thoughts?
Recently, temperature stories about India and New Delhi and in Pakistan in recent years. Oh my God, they've never seen temperatures like that. No, they see them every year. And
then the monsoon comes and they go away.
and yeah, well, there's another example is they have a low monsoon season. It's climate change. They have a high monsoon season. It's climate change. They can't make up their mind. But
Right.
No, they've made up their mind. It's all climate change, no matter what the effect is. It's climate change. And when they look at, the India stories, or when they've said things that a couple of years ago, Texas was relatively hot, and they said, oh, it's climate change. It's probably 30% chance, greater chance of climate change of these temperatures due to climate change. It's like, well, A, that's not what history shows. B, if it were lower, you wouldn't say the same thing. And it's lower now. And you can't attribute these things. There's no way of doing it. You make things up with attribution models. It's like attribution models are the modern day equivalent of a crystal ball.
Well, the attribution models really.
By the way,
tick
I
me
want to
off
point
quite a
out
bit.
that meteorologists do it with crystal balls.
But I do think that one of the most egregious trends in media right now, and it has to be on purpose, I really like very intentional, as in designed for this purpose. I really think that the attribution science organization, World Weather Attribution, whoever they are, specifically exists in order to give headlines to the AP and to other news organizations to blast out, because it's too tightly linked every single time there is any kind of extreme weather ever. World Weather Attribution doesn't even have their study published yet, and it's already released to the media, and the media is already claiming that it proves XYZ effect is due to climate change. Or XYZ flood is like 10,000 times more likely with climate change than without, or whatever it happens to be. It's really gross. It's not science. Every time I'm reading an article and they make some kind of a claim along those lines, like, oh, and this is 10 times more likely because of the warming temperatures of the earth. I click on their stupid hyperlink. Every single time it's World Weather Attribution. I have to think that a lot of the scientists, because they are science desk reporters, which doesn't always mean that they have any kind of background in science whatsoever. Most of them don't. Most of them have like a fruity gender studies degree or something like that. But they're gonna go ahead. They know that this stuff is being tailor-made for them, and they run with it, because
Right.
like Sterling said, it's not about reporting on science. It's about using scientific language and the appearance of scientific rigor to push an agenda.
I mean, we're
Right. But in the background to all of this, it really is just this. It's spinning the wheel of climate, where, it's warm winter or cold winter or snow or no snow. See, told you.
Yeah. Well, World Weather Attribution, it's amazing. Linnea says, oh, before they've even published their studies, my suspicion is that most of their studies never get published, certainly not peer reviewed. It's once they release the initial headlines, that is put aside and it's on to the next attribution. And the way it works is, studies take time. they take looking at
and less
data
corruptive
and
attribution
trends.
studies.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is real studies, peer-reviewed studies take time. We don't have time. We don't need we don't have stinking time. We got to get the headlines, and the headlines are, so we release a study within a day or 2 days of a particular event, and we say it couldn't have happened without climate change. Well, how do we know that? Well, we ran our models, our particular brand of models that says, could this have happened without climate change? Let's take out CO2 and run it and run it with CO2 rising. Well, it's climate change.
Yep. And, we just had a comment up there talking about the turbulence issue with Singapore Airlines. And that was a perfect example of how the media just went berserk over an incident. Some people were injured. Some people were injured on a flight. There was turbulence. It must be climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Linnea. We've got, there it is. There's our article on climate realism. And anytime you see this BS happening in the media, you can be assured there's going to be a rebuttal up on climate realism. And take that and run with it and post it up on social media and tell people their argument is, just doesn't hold water.
Right. Sterling wrote this one. This one was particularly egregious, I think. Died, in severe turbulence.
Yeah, the guy died. And they're vultures. They're just vultures. It's like every time a shooting happens, they say, oh, guns caused this the next day, without looking at the motives, without looking at who the people are, what their supposed grievance was, and whether they might have done other kinds of damage had they not had guns. No, it's guns. Well, turbulence is climate change as if we never had turbulence before. And I think in that article, I look at the statistics pretty good. Turbulence isn't worsening. Injuries from turbulence are not getting worse despite more air travelers and air miles traveled. It's hard to say climate change is making something worse if nothing's getting worse.
Yeah.
Oh, but they'll always try anyway, Sterling.
Well,
it's not going to stop them. You can't let facts get in the way of this one.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Energy colonizer got it right. He quotes Rahm Emanuel. I've quoted that before. Never let a crisis go to waste.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
Very good.
All right. Go ahead, Linnea.
Sure. Let's get to a question and answer. Maybe we'll get a little bit more chat going here. So this is a funny comment that I pinned here for us to look at, / kind of a question from Andrew Godridge. He says, I'll post $20 to the Heartland Institute from England. YouTube can't stop the old-fashioned postal service, or can they? I don't know. Susan might be able to try. She might sneak into the mail and steal it.
Yeah. I guess it's whether the postmaster and his minions were appointed by Biden, and they're searching mail for climate skeptic funding.
We might have to go to snail mail at some point if this gets bad enough.
Right. But the Postal Service is going through modernization. And I got to tell you this story.
Modernization.
This is happening here. This is happening here in Reno. And this is no joke. The Postal Service has decided through this modernization program that it's going to be more efficient in Reno to move the sorting center that they've had in Reno since, Reno existed for the Postal Service, move it to Sacramento. And so we will get all of the snail mail coming into that. We'll put it on trucks and we will send it across Highway 80, Interstate 80, across the top of the Sierra Nevada down into Sacramento, where it will get sorted and then brought back up over the hill so that it can be distributed in Reno. This is part of their modernization effort, right? Apparently, no one told them, or they never figured out on their own, that Interstate 80 is regularly closed by winter storms and traffic jams and accidents and fires and all kinds of stuff. And so the public here has gone berserk over this. They're like, are you out of your mind? To the point of the district attorney for Washoe County in Reno said, enough of this. I am filing a lawsuit against the Postal Service to stop this idiocy. Yay for him. But they're saying on one hand, well, climate change is making weather worse. And so now we've got a government entity who's supposed to be listening to climate change saying, well, we're going to ship it across, where the weather won't be a problem. That's how crazy it's gotten out there, folks.
But we still, despite all that, despite the fears that the Postal Service may be compromised, we do advocate you cut that check.
Yeah.
Don't let us dissuade you from sending money.
Okay. Here's a question from our good friend Albert. He says, question, MIT claimed that light at a 45-degree angle can evaporate water. How could that, if true, impact our understanding of cloud formation and weather model improvements?
Yeah, this is a new finding that was recently published in scientific journals and got a lot of press, basically saying that the old idea of evaporation through, molecular pop-off due to warmer temperatures isn't the only mechanism by which evaporation can occur. And typically like this, if you've got cold water, it doesn't evaporate as fast as warm water. And of course, the warmer ocean temperatures causing more evaporation, causing more water vapor in the atmosphere. That is the basis of some of the climate change arguments, that we've got this positive feedback for water vapor. But there's this new discovery that found that photons themselves, when they hit the surface of the water, can cause a molecule of water to jump off the surface and get into the atmosphere. And it's a new finding. They never expected it. So what does this mean? Well, I would say that the effect overall globally is tiny. It's certainly not negligible, but it's probably a lot smaller than just regular evaporation. But here's the thing. The Earth is self-regulating. The intertropical convergence zone around the equator self-regulates Earth's temperature every day. Water vapor evaporates into the atmosphere, the thunderstorms form, they go up into the higher atmosphere, produce rain, cooling effects, and the process is a thermostat. And it keeps doing that. So I don't think it'll appreciably change climate science. I think they'll ignore it pretty much, but it certainly is interesting.
I just don't think we know enough about that. It's one study. And the question is, will its data, will its methodologies be confirmed after continued examination, or will it be an outlier that's ultimately dismissed? But I don't think we know that yet.
Right.
Man, the cloud issue is already complicated enough. Can't wait to see what this does to clouds, to being able to put them into the models. Okay. Here is Jim asking, how do the alarmists get the science to say this is the hottest time in the last 100,000 years?
Well, they just make shit up.
Look, there is no the science. There is no official thing called the science. And it's like a looming character in a South Park episode. The science says. No, there's science. And science is a method, and the method doesn't dictate the outcome. It produces results, and they didn't rely on that. They are science-y, not science executors or followers.
Right.
They jump temperatures high. Cause must be climate change. How high? Highest ever. There's no science. There's no research. There's no body of evidence that showed that last July was the hottest in 125,000 years. It was speculation.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. They use a computer model to produce what they consider to be a plausible output, and then they adapt that with speculation, saying, well, it must be the hottest in whatever time. And they point to these proxies that are used to look at, estimate temperatures that happened in the past. And that's the big key word here. These are estimates. One of the biggest failures of proxies is tree rings, Michael Mann's favorite. The problem with tree rings is really simple. They are not exclusively an indicator of past temperatures. Why? Because plants conform to something called Liebig's Law. Liebig's Law, the minimum. Any plant that's growing, whether it's a beanstalk or a tree or a cornstalk or a weed, conform to this. The bottom line is that the least available growth factor is the limiting factor in the growth of any plant. So in the case of a tree, Let's say we had a very warm year, right? Well, that might make the tree grow more. But if it was also a very dry year, the lack of water could have limited its growth, or let's say we had a very wet year, that could have caused more growth, even though the temperature didn't change much. Or we could have had a situation where it was a cloudy year. We had a lot of cloud cover, so there wasn't a lot of photosynthesis going on,
shortage of minerals in the soil, or a perturbation. I mean, anything that might affect the plant. So a bear came along and rubbed up against his back up against a younger tree and scraped off some bark and bent it. Well, that could affect its growth in the growth rings, all sorts of things. And, the other proxy data, stoma data. Well, stoma data, when they look at even when they're looking at tree rings, if you take it at face value, when you look at shell middens, if you take them at face value, if you look at stoma data, it is not to a tenth of a degree or even to a degree. It's within a range of degrees, and they're guessing about which part of the range it was.
Yep. And it's all an estimate. It's not an actual thermometer. It's a guess. So let's see what else we got question-wise.
Right. This is from Tom White. He says, which is more accurate to use, the logarithmic effect or the saturation of CO2 and its ability to absorb infrared waves?
The first and second part of that question don't necessarily connect for me, so I don't quite understand it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, because the logarithmic effect is measuring the effect of CO2 saturation on absorption. So
I would say
Tom,
that
if you're still
what's
here,
more
if you can clarify
representative
this
of
one.
reality, what's more representative, not necessarily accurate, is a logarithmic scale for carbon dioxide, because it does indeed show that the first couple hundred parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has the most effect on temperature. And then as you get more and more saturation up at the top, you get a flat curve, and it becomes less effective at warming the atmosphere. And that's why many people say that at the current levels that we're experiencing, 420 parts per million plus, it's not really going to make a whole lot of difference if it goes up to 500, because the effect in that top part of the logarithmic scale is minimal.
My thought on this is that to answer that question well, we need an atmospheric physicist who's actually studied this, and I'm not going to try and answer it.
Is it your thought, Anthony, that, if we got a time machine and we jumped forward 100 years, then, and if carbon dioxide continued to rise during that time, that you would see a pretty significant decoupling of the trend between any kind of what warming trend there might be, depending on who you ask and what data you consult, and the CO2 measurements that we get from like Mauna Loa?
What?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I every once in a while, I try to follow something, and then it's like I lost the plot. Go ahead.
Do you think over time, the more we get, in terms of if carbon dioxide emissions from oceans or wherever, from people, whatever, keep going up, you're going to see less and less of a seemingly connected trend between whatever warming is being measured through satellite data or whatever, minus the UHI.
Yes.
Will that be decoupling more and more over time?
I agree. Yes, it will be decoupling more and more. And it's already happening. If you look at like some of the temperature data we've seen, most of the gains in temperature have happened since 1850 up to, well before that. In fact, the rate of warming happened just as fast in the early part as it has the second part. The point is that as we get more and more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the effect is going to be less, and we're not going to see that coupling or that correlation to be as tight as it used to be. And so they're going to have to get creative to try to keep this going.
Okay, this looks like the last question that we have got. Didn't we have ice ages when CO2 was at 2,000 parts per million?
Not that I recall. Yeah, the ice ages that we're talking about, I think 4 or 5 of them have all been in the last, 1,000,000 years or so. maybe 1.5 million years or so. And there were periods where it was cooler than today, where CO2 levels were much higher than today, 2,000, 5,000 parts per million. And there were long periods of time over the Earth's history where CO2 levels were much lower than today, or not much lower. They haven't been much lower, but lower than today, where it was hotter. But we're talking not just since the Ice Age cycle started, which is relatively new in geological history, but 50, 100 million years ago. You look back at but I could be wrong, but I don't think there were any times in the last 1.5 years where the CO2 was 2,000 parts per million.
Right. The last ice age, we saw like huge reduction of CO2
Yep.
in the atmosphere, and it got down to the danger level. At 150 parts per million, plants stop photosynthesis. There's not enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to support it. And I think during the last ice age, we got down to something like 180.
Yeah, 180.
And if it had gone 30 parts per million more, we may have lost all plant life on the planet. So,
well, what's been, over time, over the history of the Earth, what's been happening is slowly CO2 has been drawn out of the atmosphere by plants, and then the plants die and get compressed, and over time and heat turn into carbonaceous rocks that store carbon dioxide. We're releasing some of that now. But the estimates are that at the current rate of reduction, if the ice ages continued the way they did, probably in a couple of million years, we would have reached that, based on the trend, we would have reached that danger zone. That would have been multiple ice age cycles in the future. They last about 150,000 years. And we may have prevented that. Hey, folks, that's a good thing. We're keeping plants alive.
Right. So, okay, next question.
I think that's all we got.
Oh, all right then. Well,
I think we were going to go to videos.
Yeah, well, we've got some great videos. I don't know if you folks know or not, but Linnea has been taking what we've done on Climate at a Glance and turning them into these short videos and talking about, bullet points in a calm, reasonable, and pleasant manner, which, of course, immediately got us demonetized. But, that's YouTube. The point is that these videos that we have at heartland.org talk about all of the issues associated with climate change, and do it in an easy to watch, encapsulated short video that doesn't throw a lot of hype at you, or no hype at all. In fact, it's just plain old facts. And Linnea's done a fantastic job at presenting these things. And I'd advise you to go take a look. The sea level rise video that we have is one of the most popular, and you might check that one out. Linnea, you have any comments on this?
Not any more than I've had when we've talked about it before, but for the case of new listeners, this was a project that was pretty long in the making. We spent quite a bit of time writing out all these scripts and getting a real professional camera crew in to do it. So we're really excited about this project. We're trying really hard to keep them pretty short in that 3-minute range so that they're more easily accessible to a wider audience, and we can put them on different platforms and stuff. We've also been cutting them into YouTube Shorts. So if you go to our YouTube page and look at the Shorts tab, we have some of them in even smaller clips there. And I think it's a great project. I'm excited about it.
Well, good. I hope
and it got us demonetized. So.
Yeah. Who managed your wardrobe during this whole thing? I noticed you have a different wardrobe for every video.
Me, I did. I packed I don't know, 5 jackets and 8 shirts or something and switched between them, and yeah, it worked out.
Well, see, I want to make the point that although people seem to think that the Heartland Institute is flush with big oil cash, we don't even have enough money to get poor Linnea a wardrobe manager. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty well wraps it up for this episode of Climate Realism Show. Thank you, Linnea and Sterling, for joining us today. Thank you, Jim Lakely and Keely Dracala in the background doing producing for us and making sure all the graphics pop up and the questions pop up. And I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us. I want to remind you to visit our websites, climateataglance.com, climaterealism.com, energyataglance.com, and whatsupwiththat.com for the latest in climate debunking and climate facts. I'm your host, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow for Environment and Climate at the Heartland Institute, wishing you a great Friday and a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye.